See, and it's not our action creates faith, but we live in action because of our faith.
Welcome to Fireside Talks, where we help bring you from survival to stability.
Through skills, support, and the hope of Jesus Christ.
How is everybody doing today? So last week was a little bit different, and it was just Samantha on the podcast because I was out for a trip for work, and I think I might have gotten a little bit of the crud while I was on the airplane. So if I sound a little different or you see us cutting away a bunch, it's because I had to cough or sneeze. So probably something, like I said, from sitting in an airport all day for a couple days. But this month, we're going to kind of focus on the idea of faith in action. So faith in action it's one of those real churchy sayings, right? Don't get me wrong, 100% true. The book of James talks a lot about works and faith, and you can't have one without the other, but it's not works that leads you to salvation. But that's not where our focus is today. But it's just one of those things that even as a pastor, sometimes when we hear some of those churchy things that I cringe just a little bit. Like, it's just kind of a buzzword thing, and not some of my favorite stuff when we're talking about what's happening in the church today. But faith in action is very much a true thing. See, this Bible here, it was never written to us as a historical document. It was written to us to give us examples on how to live, not how they lived. And it is here to give us an idea of Jesus's ministry, but it's more or less an instruction manual on how to live like him. So faith in action is something that is important, and it is something we should be working on, and it's something I think I'm gonna guess all of us fail at all of the time. So when we're thinking about faith in action, the one story in the Bible that comes to my mind is the story of the Good Samaritan. In our country, we have Good Samaritan laws. When I used to teach at the college and I would teach new EMTs and paramedics, we would talk about the Good Samaritan law. And mainly in that context of EMTs and paramedics and stuff on how you're not covered under the Good Samaritan law. But most people outside of those handful of paramedics, EMTs, nurses, doctors, were covered under the Good Samaritan law throughout most of our country. And what is the Good Samaritan law? Basically, all the Good Samaritan law is saying is that if I stop or I come across a sick or injured person and I in good faith try to help them, I can't be held liable. I can't get in trouble for it. Now, obviously, if you're a trained medical professional and you do something at a car accident or something like that, and it was the blatantly wrong thing to do, well, you're a trained medical professional. You should know better. But if you're not, and you're in good faith trying to help someone, there's that Good Samaritan law. And what that really does is when we teach CPR to the public, don't be as scared of doing CPR to try to help someone with the idea that you might be doing it wrong or that they might not make it, because that's not your fault. You did your best, you tried, and that's the Good Samaritan law. In the Good Samaritan story in the Bible, it's a little bit different. And the Good Samaritan story is found in Luke 10, starting in verse 25. And I'm going to read it. It's kind of a long read, but I'm going to go ahead and read it all to you. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, and the lawyer standing up to talk to Jesus, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, What is written in the law, and how do you read it? And he answered, You should love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength, and with all of your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You've answered this. You've answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down the road, and he saw him and passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, I will repay you when I come back. Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy, and Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So there's a few things happening in this story that I think we need to make sure we understand. See, I'm a real big fan of, and if you've ever seen any of my sermons or when I was preaching at the church, I'm more of what they would call an expository preacher. So I like to get into the nitty gritty of the story to really get in there and make sure we understand what's happening. Because I'm in the way my brain processes all of this is I'm not a really emotion driven person. I'm more of a facts and help me understand it deeper kind of person. So to hear this story, well, okay, the Samaritan did a good thing. But if we don't know who the Samaritans are, then the story doesn't have the meaning that it could. And it might not be as impactful as it could be to us. Some people will read this, have no idea about the history of the Samaritans, and be impacted just the same. That's just not the way I'm built. So the Jews were known for their strong hatred toward the Samaritans. And it really, that hatred goes back, we can almost say all the way to Jacob, back to the patriarchs in the early Old Testament. But probably one of the more recent things, and probably easier for us to wrap our heads around, is that when the Samaritans were taken captive, well, they weren't Samaritans yet, but they were taken captive, they came back, and they intermarried with their captives, or captors, rather. They intermarried with them, and basically now they weren't a full-blooded Jew anymore. So the full-blooded Jews really, really did not like them because, and it did say in God's word to not intermarry outside of your people, and to not take their gods as your God. And the Samaritans did that. While they still practiced a lot of the Jewish customs and standards, they had a history of idolatry too. But really, if we go back through it, all of the Jewish people did at some point. But there was a common thing that when priests in Jerusalem would pray, they would pray for when the resurrection would come, that God would forget the Samaritans. So I mean, that's a pretty deep hatred. The other thing I think that's important in this story is it says a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among the robbers. That tells us a couple things. See, in the cultural times of Jesus, if I were to say that I'm going to go down, we think of what our maps look like today. And if you look at my map, if I were to have a map in front of me, up would be north, down would be south. So if I say I'm going down to, I'm in Sioux Falls, I'm going down to Omaha, I'm going to go south to Omaha. If I'm going to go up to Fargo, I'm going north to Fargo, North Dakota. Well, going down to them was less about north and south and east and west and more about topographical, more about elevation. So going from Jerusalem to Jericho, you actually went down in elevation to Jericho. There's a couple things to think about that, though. If we're going down to Jericho, that means we're leaving Jerusalem. The way the story reads, I read that the priests and the Levites are going down to Jericho. See, now by chance, a priest was going down that road. He wasn't going up that road. He wasn't going up to Jerusalem. He was going down to Jericho. So a priest and a Levite would have some very specific duties that they would have to perform in Jerusalem. And without getting too far into the weeds about some of the cleanliness laws and staying clean in the Old Testament, if they would have touched a beaten man, some translations will actually say that not only was, or mine does too, it says, fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed. Some of them will actually say leaving him naked. But if this priest or this Levi was to touch this bloodied up, beaten, naked guy, they would be considered unclean. And if they were unclean, they couldn't go to Jerusalem and perform their duties because they would have had a certain period of time where they would have had to go through their ritual cleansing. So if he was on his way to work, he might not be able to do his job if he's unclean. Jesus is talking to a lawyer. So a lawyer then wouldn't have been an attorney like we think of in the court of law. It would have been someone that taught the law of Moses. So he would have held some kind of priestly type of position. He's talking to this lawyer who would have understood, well, I mean, you can't blame the priest or the Levite. He's going up to Jerusalem to do his job, and if he's unclean, he can't fulfill his duties. I don't blame the guy for not touching him. Like, he had other things he had to do, and of course, the Pharisees, the Levites, the Sadducees, the priests, they would have put their duty to God above all else, even helping another person. So the idea of if he was going up the road, that he walked by on the other side to avoid becoming unclean, well, that would have made sense. Like, nobody would have really argued that. They would have been like, okay, I get it. He wants to be able to do his job when he gets there. But he wasn't going up to Jerusalem. He was going down to Jericho. That means his priestly duties were done. So if he were to become unclean, it wouldn't have stopped him from doing the duties in the temple because they were already taken care of. He had already completed that. But then that Samaritan, that person that they hated so much, if you notice at the very end of this story, after Jesus is done talking and he says, which of these do you think proved to be a neighbor? He said the one who showed him mercy. He wouldn't even say the Samaritan. See, the Samaritan really had the action of faith that we should have. And it's tough. It's hard because I completely understand. Now, granted, I was a paramedic for a lot of years, and we walked into situations kind of like this all of the time, and it doesn't bother me. But I wouldn't blame anybody for seeing somebody on the side of the road and not stopping because they were afraid. I get it. I understand how that can happen. But that's not faith. That's not compassion. That is not the love of Christ being shown to one another. And it makes me think about just a few years ago after I had been done being a paramedic and we had moved to South Dakota. It was during COVID, and the church I was at then, we did close for a few weeks, but not very long. especially if you're listening somewhere like Illinois, California, New York. Um, we only closed for about 4 weeks and went online for about 4 weeks. Um, but one morning I was on my way to the church, and I was the associate pastor at that time, and I was going to meet the pastor so we could do our Sunday morning live stream. So hop in the truck, heading down the road, and a little over halfway there, and this is kind of in the middle of all that. Everybody's scared. Nobody knows what's going on with this COVID thing. Um, Everybody thinks it's the new Ebola, and I'm not beating up on people that were scared of the COVID virus. I'm just saying we really didn't understand much of anything at this point. Just to give you that idea, it was very early um, in the COVID stuff, and I'm going down the road, and I see a person sleeping in a bus stop, and it was chilly. It wasn't cold, but it was chilly, and something in my head told me that I needed to stop and check on this person, but I kept driving. Nope, I am on my way up the road, so that way we can do this live stream. Now, granted, it was way early. I had plenty of time, but I was on my way to work, so that way I could make sure that we could live stream our message today and get it out to the people of our church. I had things to do, so I needed to go. So get to the church. I'm the first one there, and have my backpack and start going through stuff. And I realized that I had forgotten my computer. And I don't know how much you know about setting up a live stream, but a computer is very important. It's a big part of live stream and stuff. So, all right, not a big deal. I left plenty early. I've got plenty of time to run home, grab my laptop, and come back. No big deal. I've got all kinds of time. So, hop in the truck, do what any good person would do, and I took a different route home. So get home, grab my laptop, head back out the door. So on my drive back to the church, I go the same direction I did the first time. So I would have to go past this bus stop again where the person was sleeping. And now remember, prior to this, I'd done almost, I think I was in that 18-ish year range of being a paramedic. So for a long time, I'd been a paramedic. I worked through the bird flu. I worked through Ebola. I worked through H1N1. I worked on the ambulance through all of that stuff. And there's this person who now I know is a woman sleeping at the bus stop. Okay. So I actually did drive past. That was a safety thing, because just pulling my truck up onto the sidewalk was not a good decision. But I turned around in a gas station parking lot. And while I was in that gas station, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab a breakfast sandwich and a bottle of water, and I'm going to go back. So I go back, pull over to a safe place, and find this woman sleeping in the bus stop, and wake her up, and thankfully she woke up. Start talking to her, and she tells me that her friend's in the hospital, and is super sick, and left the hospital late last night. The buses quit running. That's just kind of where she ended up. So I said, well, do you need a ride somewhere? So she did. She wanted a ride, and I, to be honest with you, I genuinely don't remember where she wanted to go, but it wasn't far from where we were. Gave her the breakfast sandwich, gave her the bottle of water, and as we're driving, she says, I think I've got a fever. Oh, here it is. Great. I just picked up a person with this crazy disease, and now she's in my truck. I never once thought during my time on the ambulance that whatever this person that I'm sitting so close to, I'm touching them, I'm starting IVs, I'm managing airways, I'm doing whatever for this person in the back of the ambulance. Never once did it cross my mind that whatever they have, I could catch. Because at that time, I was doing a job. I had a job to do, and it was to make sure that this person got to the hospital alive. That was my job. Or at least got to the hospital in a better situation than what I found them in. Never once did I think, man, they're going to get me sick. See, and I never took that thought process into helping this woman at a bus stop. I never took the idea of what I'm doing here is making sure she ends up in a better situation than when I found her. So then, not gonna try to hide anything. Afterwards, man, I went to the drugstore and I bought rubbing alcohol and I wiped down the door handles on my truck. I let her use my phone. I wiped it all down with rubbing alcohol. I did all of those things. But never once in all of those years was I afraid of getting sick. But this time I was. And I think it's because I didn't allow my faith to work out that I'm just trying to make sure that this woman ends up in a better situation than what I found her in. I dropped her off. I prayed with her. And then, to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what ever happened. But I know that she left and she had something to drink, she got something to eat, and she got safely to where she needed to be. So, never seen her before, never seen her again, but who's your neighbor, right? That's what they're asking here. So how do we start to live out our faith in action? Well, I think it's little stuff. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. And we're going to talk about a few different things this month as far as living out our faith in action. See, and it's not our action creates faith, but we live in action because of our faith. See, and that's what James talks about. That you try to show me your deeds, and I will show you my faith, but you'll see my deeds because of my faith. See, once we start to have that faith and we start to develop that relationship with Christ, it's not that we feel obligated to do these actions. It's not that we're doing it because the Bible tells us to. We're doing it because we recognize that that's what being a follower of Christ is it's this life of servanthood. And a lot of people don't like that word, that servanthood. But I'm here to tell you right now that when we start serving others, it's just good for your soul. It's going to make you feel better. It's almost like a selfish thing. Because there's nothing more satisfying than knowing that we've helped someone else. So we're going to talk about the idea of sharing your faith this week. And a lot of people, I think, are afraid of sharing their faith because they feel like it's preachy. And you don't have to preach to people to reach them. More often than not, sharing your faith is more about your actions than any of the words that ever come out of your mouth. And sometimes it's the words that never come out of your mouth that show your faith. Another thing that we'll touch on this week is the idea of being a light everywhere you go. And again, being the light is a very churchy thing. And it's one of those things that I'm kind of like, kind of cliche. But it's dark out there. It's dark out there. And if we can have somebody in our lives, or we can be the person that's illuminating the way, man, what a change we can make. What a difference we can make in individuals' lives. We have a lot of opportunities to show our faith to the people around us without ever using one of those Bible words, without ever telling a story from the Bible. Don't get me wrong, absolutely use it. There's probably parts throughout the day at work that I'll quote the Bible without ever saying, because you don't have to say, uh, you know, say a sentence or a verse from the Bible and then give the chapter and verse. You can just say it because it's just as applicable 2,000 years ago as it is today. Um, one of mine is the idea that a wise man seeks the counsel of many. And I'll say that, but I don't say, oh, that is this chapter, this verse, this book. Oh, and people are like, oh, that's smart. Oh yeah, well, it's not my idea. It's 4,000 years old. Um, so I'm excited to see where this ends up going this month, because I think this is something we fail at a lot in the church universal today. A lot of us go to church, we hear a good message, and when we walk out the front doors of that church, that's where we leave it. But what if we didn't? What if we took that with us and we put it into action day after day? What if we did it just once a week? What if we did it twice a week? Started to put into action the things that the Bible's teaching us. I think we're going to make a dramatic change in our workplaces, in our communities, in our families, um, and it's going to have a dramatic transformation on us too. And I don't know about you, kind of being sick right now. I'm not going to say like I'm depressed, but I'm not overly cheerful. I'm not super excited about everything. But I'm not going to joke when I say that who couldn't use more joy in their life? Who couldn't be in a better mood more often? Who wouldn't enjoy going through life with a little less anxiety? Um, I don't see how getting rid of those things are going to hurt us at all. And if we can get rid of those things because we start living more Christ-like, man, it just makes sense to me. So I'm excited to see what the month brings. I'm excited to see what the conversations bring. I hope you enjoyed last week's podcast. I actually haven't had an opportunity to watch it yet. After being on my work trip for a week and then coming home and getting sick. But if you enjoyed this, hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom. Share it with somebody. Don't forget to check out our website at firesidecommunity.org. There's merch, all of our podcasts, all of that good stuff is there. And don't be afraid to reach out. I know there's email addresses and stuff on there. If you have questions about what's happening at Fireside, reach out and ask. We'll let you know. Maybe it's time for just kind of an update. Episode 2. So I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, be good out there.